Hey, it's Chris from Printing Fundamentals, and in this episode, we're going to talk about Prusa Slicer. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and download and install Prusa Slicer. Download for Windows. Don't have to put an email in there, or you can subscribe if you want to. So do it in the default location. Drivers firmware update. I'm not sure if that's just for Prusa printers, but if you want to choose that, you can. I may do things for other printers too. I'm not sure. And then go ahead and launch. Installs DLLs. So as you can see, it's a different layout. If you already have seen Cura, it's a much different layout on it. And so what'll pop up when you first install this, it'll come with a configuration wizard. This will automatically pop up when you first install. And then you can go through, you can choose if you have a Prusa printer. If you don't, you can next go through and then go to your other vendors and choose the one you need. And then next that, and then it'll show you all your different versions of the printer in your brand. I have the two Sidewinder X1s, so that's the one I'm choosing. And then you can next, if you got more than one printer that's different styles and stuff, then you can do custom printer setups and have different profiles for each one. Mine are both the same and they work exactly the same. I both got stock firmware, so I'm just going to use one profile for both of them. Then you choose the filaments that you want for, and these will have just the basic stats on them. So if you choose generic PLA, it'll give you the print stats for that, the default ones, and then you can adjust the temperature and stuff once you get into where you're about to do a print. And then always check for automatic updates, and then downloads, wherever you're going to download from. Just do your default path. It's usually just whatever you have for your system already, so just do that. And then I didn't bother with that. And then file associations, you can choose this as your file associations if this is the only slicer you're going to use. I just leave it undone because I've used this a little bit, but I've also used Cura, and I don't like having just one automatically take over that stuff if you're opening files and things. So I just leave that alone. And then you want to choose advanced mode to start with. That'll give you enough options that you can mess with all the standard stuff. Expert mode goes way farther into stuff that later on, if you feel like you want to tweak things, then you can do expert mode and choose. There's a lot more settings to choose from, but the advanced mode, because the simple mode is a little too simple and you don't see all the settings that you can see like in Cura under the all stuff. So I just do advanced mode, and that gives you a good amount of stuff that you can play with, and then it actually shows some tweaker stuff too. Go ahead and finish with that, and then now we're at the main part. Okay, so now on the generic stuff, so we got the advanced and print settings, you got system presets, so you can kind of make either smaller layers or taller layers. The smaller layers will get better details. You'll get less noticeable lines on your walls, and then it'll also take longer the smaller you go, because if you have 0.1 millimeter, it's going to take twice as much to get as much height, twice as long as to get as much height as 0.2 millimeter, the normal one. And then I choose generic PLA for the filament, and you got your printer on there, and then supports you can choose for build plate only or everywhere. I'm not sure about the enforcers, but on like Cura you can do build plate or everywhere. Then you can do general infill or choose some brim. And then, so if we go into the actual print settings, layers and perimeters, that's your top and bottom and walls. So we're doing layer height. You can adjust the layer height here and adjust the first layer height if you want to start tweaking stuff. And then vertical shells, perimeter these are the walls. So that's the default 3 walls, and if you need something that gets a little stronger, you can add more walls to it. If you do something like a flat hook that comes on a table, hooked onto a table or something, then or hooked on a wall, then you could do 99 walls, and that'll just print walls for the whole hook part of it and stuff. And then horizontal shells, that's going to be your top and bottom layers. And so normally they do 4 on Cura and stuff. This one has 5, so you can, so it defaults with 5. And then you can also choose where you want the seam at, and so the Z seam on Cura, but the seam position is where on each layer where the nozzle starts and stops each layer. So you start one spot, you go all the way around the print, and then stop back at that same spot again. You can choose what position it does it, so you can have it put it in the back, you can have it put it back, right, left, you can have it and put it in random where it stops and starts. People will notice that stuff if they have issues with the retraction settings and they notice little pock marks randomly around their prints. That's the Z seam putting on random. And so you can tweak later on. I'll tell you how to tweak things to make the Z seam, kind of minimize it or even try to hide it and stuff. And but for now you can just choose what position you want it in, and like on Cura it does, like you can choose the sharpest corner. I'm sure that's what the aligned is. So but then And then infill, you can choose what kind of infill you want. And most of the time I just choose cubic for normal prints, and like 5% for display stuff, or 25% for something that needs to be able to hold weight and stuff. And then if you want to do like gyroid, if you're doing like aquarium stuff, you can take gyroid, you can drill a hole in the bottom of it and then fill sand in it and shake it around. All the areas that gyroid interconnects, and there's spaces that go all the way through the whole print in different directions. Unlike where cubic, you're sitting on the corner of a cube, and each cubic section is sectioned off. So on gyroid, you can actually start at one spot of the print and you could fill it up with sand or whatever other kind of substance you want to fill it all the way up. You can shake it around to fill it up completely with sand so that it weighs it down, so you can have stuff in the aquarium that doesn't float. And then there's different kinds for strength and different kinds for just display stuff. And then like lightning does a bare minimum, so it'll print whatever supports it absolutely needs for stuff. But then once it gets to an area where there's no vertical need for things, then it'll just leave open air in the middle. But these are all the different kinds of infill. And so you can have the infill print in different ways. For like surface stuff, monotonic, it means it prints it in order, like back and forth, line to line, instead of moving all over the place to print optimally fast where it needs to put it. It'll actually print everything in a row. And that usually makes it look nice and uniform. And then you can do for skirt and brim. On Cura, actually the default is 2 loops. So it'll make a 2 line skirt around it. You can do 1 on this, or you can change to 2. And then leave skirt height 1. It just prints a line around your print, and then that kind of is a basic kind of keeping ambient temperature around the print type of thing. But then you can also do a brim, and you can do brim with outer brim only or inner brim only, or both of them, to hold the print down better. I usually use brim on just about everything that I print, just because it's assurance that the print's going to stay down. It's kind of an extra precaution just to make sure that corners don't lift and stuff like that, or it minimizes the amount of lift that happens on corners and stuff. So I print a brim on most things, and especially if you got tall, skinny objects that you got to print, definitely do a brim. That will help keep it locked in place when you're getting up there and up high with the nozzle and stuff. And then the brim width on Cura, you can't really, there's not really, I guess you probably could if you wanted to tweak specific stuff, but when you choose a brim on Cura, it's normally about a 10 millimeter width that it prints for the brim. So that's what I usually put. That's what I put on here too. It's just a good solid outline around the print to hold it down. And then if you're having to do spheres or pyramid, like an upside down pyramid type, where the spot on the bed's going to be a lot smaller than the rest of the print, then you want to do a raft, and that'll help hold that in place Some people use a raft or end up using a raft to fix adhesion issues, and that's really a big no-no. It's just like you've got an issue, you need to figure out what's wrong with it, and not use the raft as a band-aid. It's raft is specifically for stuff with a small contact with the bed and then a larger body up above the print or up above the surface. And then support material, so you can do supports, and they have the major ones are the normal supports, where they're just vertical, and you'll use normal supports, regular ones on use regular supports. So you can use grid or snug. That's regular supports. For the grid support is for regular like flat overhangs and stuff. You want to use organic. It's called tree support on Cura, but you want to use organic for roundness of objects and things like statues and things like that. You'll use organic for where it's not just a flat surface that you can do a standard one. That the organic ones are better for curved surfaces and things like that. And then so yeah, you can tweak different stuff in the things if you're having problems with it, the supports being too hard to get off, or if they not close enough to where you're still getting sagging underneath of the print lines above it, above where it's supposed to be supporting the print. So just keep that in mind when you're doing supports, so you can make those changes in here. And then speed, my default on Cura for mine is 50 or 60 for the infill, and then it usually does 25 for the external walls. So you're going to do your fastest speed is going to be the infill, and then your walls or outer walls are going to be about half that speed. So you can, down the road, if you want to try and print faster, you can tweak stuff to actually get it to go much faster and be able to print pretty well. But when you start like tweaking stuff, you gotta make a bunch of changes to the flow and the output, and we'll cover that down the road. For right now, it's just I usually use just whatever standard default speeds are there, and then that's pretty solid for printing. And then you probably won't have multiple extruders, but those are the main. So layers and perimeters, which are your top, bottom, and walls, then your infill, and skirt and brim for bed adhesion, and then your support material for supports. So those are and your speed, and then you're going to have like the temperature of the so your generic PLA. You're going to have, so yeah, those are your print settings, and then your filament settings. You know, I guess you can choose whatever color you want, just so you can, for visual help. But what I do is this is where you're going to put the temperature that you're going to use in the filament. And on Cura, mine's always the same on the first layer and the rest of them. I'm not sure what difference that makes, but I always just keep them the same all the way up. I've never had a problem with that. Bed, you're going to want to do, I usually keep the bed at the same temperature the whole time. And so you want to, a lot of people will do around 60 for PLA. I've tried 60 to 65, and on mine specifically 65 works the best for me. I've never had issues with 65. I've tried to go down before to 60, and it's been a hit and miss kind of, where sometimes it's good, sometimes not. But I found that for my specific printer, 65 has worked the best for me. So you want to try and mess with that, but it's between 60 and 65, because once you get to the 70, if you get to 70, that's the glass transition of PLA, and then that causes a whole bunch of new problems with bed adhesion and stuff, just because the material gets too soft and then it can't support itself when you're printing. But so that's where you want to keep it, between 60 and 65. Just keep it at most 65. You can even do lower. Some people do 40, some people do 50. You just gotta kind of figure out from experience what works best for your printer. But then cooling, you're gonna keep the fan always on. It's usually it'll start cooling on after the first like 3 or 4 layers. So it's one layer 3, and then the 4th layer it'll run at 100%, and that's what Cura does too. And that works great for PLA. If you get to PET G, you're going to want to slow the fans down, because it needs to cool not as rapidly. And especially ABS, you're going to need to probably have no fan and probably get an enclosure, because it warps really bad when it cools fast. So you're going to want to keep that in mind if you decide to go to the higher ones and stuff. And and then you just put the filament type in there. Just make sure you have the correct one. And that should be pretty much, those are most of your basic settings. And don't really need to mess with that, because it already knows your standard bed shape. I mean, unless you use a different, like a PEI on top of it or whatever. And you can set the Z offset for your printer if you want. Mine doesn't even have Z adjustment in the controls of my printer, so the only thing I do is just manually use the manual tramming, and then that's all I use to get my proper first layer. And you can also, like I do, if I'm going through and it looks like it's too low or too high when it's printing, because you can do a lot of visual checks too, then I'll just adjust the knobs on the bed, just because mine only has manual. But those are the basic things that you'll change for your prints if you're trying different stuff out. And then in another video I'll show you all the advanced stuff, how to tweak things. But that's this is all the basics for now, and so hopefully you got a good idea of where you're going to go when you try and do your regular prints and just starting out. And so this is Prusa, and then later on we'll get to the tweaking and stuff. There's a lot of settings you can do to tweak your prints to make them look better and things, and we'll cover that in another video. But these are all the basic settings for the Prusa Slicer, just to get you a little bit of familiarity with it, and then you can be on your way to printing. If you find these videos helpful, please like and subscribe to my YouTube, or go to printingfundamentals.com.